Welcome to our session on dealing with stress during COVID-19 lockdown, practical strategies and tactics of mindfulness and minimalism. Let me welcome today's speaker, Bikash Barai. Bikash is the co-founder of CISO Platform as well as FireCompass, an internet-wide shadow IT and breach risk monitoring platform. Bikash earlier founded iViZ, a security company founded by IDG Ventures, which was later acquired by Cigital and then Synopsys. He has multiple patents in cybersecurity. He has spoken at various forums like RSA Conference USA, RSA Singapore, TEDx IIM, TEDx IIT, NUS Singapore, UC Berkeley, DSCI, Nasscom, etc. Bikash also got recognized by Fortune magazine in the Fortune 40 under 40 list. Outside of security, he is passionate about painting, psychology, meditation, magic, etc. If you have any questions during the session, kindly drop them in the question box in your webinar control panel. Speaker will address them from time to time or at the end of the session. Over to you, Bikash.
Thank you, Cigital. Am I audible?
Yes, Bikash.
Great. So welcome, everybody. I am doing a webinar after a pretty long time. In my pursuit for minimalism, I had been staying out of social media or any kind of media. I'm probably going to come back at least to a small degree now, given that a little bit of my time got freed due to working remotely, working from home, etc. And before I start, I hope all of you are safe and your family members and friends are safe as well. We understand the current times, and this is a topic which had been of my, I would say, curiosity for last 5-10 years. I had been struggling for maybe a couple of decades, drowning, and somehow survived maybe the first decade, then got curious about it. And I had been looking at it with a bit of, I would say, scientific curiosity to understand. So before I start, I will quickly tell you about what had been my journey, how I got into it, and the rest of the rest of the presentation after the background is going to be on very specific strategies and tactics. So I would share very specific strategies as well as the tactics to implement and how I tried it, what are the things that worked, what did not work, etc. And also, in the meantime, if any of you want to add any questions, etc., please put it in the chat. So your questions, it'll be good if you can type it in anytime you want. Seeing your questions would be very helpful because I could then structure my discussion in terms of making it aligned to your questions. So coming back again, so here's what had been my personal journey. So when I was doing my engineering at IIT, I happened to start a company in the field of cybersecurity. So had no experience, absolutely no clue how difficult it is. So out of that sheer foolishness and lack of awareness, just jumped into it. We fortunately also raised some VC funding, etc. And our goal was to build a business where we had absolutely no knowledge. Technology was our definite area of interest, but business wasn't. So we were struggling in terms of figuring things out. And after first few years, once we started getting hang of it, the company started scaling. And I personally underwent a lot of stress. It was not just managing the stress at the company, it's also the individual life, etc. So after a while, what happened was I started getting interested in stress management purely from a very engineering-centric perspective. And in security, since we were doing reverse engineering, exploitation, etc., I took up this idea that can we reverse engineer what is stress and how does it work and stuff like that. I kind of looked into it as a model. Can we build a model to reduce stress? So there are a few things which we started. I mean, I started personally in my life. We started doing in the company with the team, which worked. A few things did not work. But after a while, I kind of graduated from stress management and realized, you know what, it's not about not having stress. It's about having happiness. So I became very curious about what is this abstract thing called happiness. I mean, we all experience happiness, but how do we build a model around it? And sometimes I find a very interesting similarity between happiness and security, which is it's both are very abstract, both are impossible, and whatever you do, you can't always be happy, and whatever you do, you can't always be secure. So happiness became another interesting area of my study and curiosity. And then after a while, I started getting these ideas from various places, which is actually about awareness. And I'll talk more about awareness, which is beyond happiness. I'll not discuss that now. I think that's a very deeper topic. So in my own experience, it had been a kind of journey from stress management to quest for happiness to awareness. So my presentation structure is also kind of put together in that way. I know the topic, we kept it as stress, and a lot of us might be going through stress. So managing that is very, very important. But then if we can have a bigger focus, a larger focus, the stress can disappear in a very different way. So I will talk about all the three aspects today, starting from a bit of stress management to happiness to awareness. So first, here's something where I will not talk much about today, which is like managing stress through better management tools. How do you have a better management of your work and life? I mean, if you don't do that, stress is going to be there. I mean, like for example, we all struggle with finding the right focus. It's a very, very hard problem using the 80-20 rule to know what are those top two things that matters in your life. What are those top two things that matters in a particular program in your organization? Which are the top two things which you could do, or five things that you could do in your security program? I mean, you know that there are more than thousands of controls. Which are the top few controls that you can implement in order to have optimal security? So prioritization is always a very hard problem. Planning, delegation. I was not delegating well. Having various productivity tools, building checklists, and many other things. And I'm sure a lot of you do those things quite well. So today I'm not going to talk about it, but this is very, very important. Unless we have this, I think the next part of pursuit for happiness, etc., can go for a toss, or it may be okay, but then you will have other kind of challenges around which your family, etc., may not like. So you may have to become a sage in the forest if you don't manage your work and your wealth and everything well. So I would put this as a basic first starting point, but we'll not discuss this today. So let's get started here. So this had been one of my core kind of learning, which is the power of beliefs. And I'll share a few of my stories. I mean, when we did our first cybersecurity venture, I was working 14, 16 hours a day, sometimes not always 16 hours, but 12 to 14 hours almost every day. And I was doing absolutely fine. And then our company got eventually acquired, and now it's part of a big US public listed company. So I remember one of the days in the afternoon, I realized that almost every day I'm feeling sleepy during the afternoon. And I was getting very, very tired during the afternoon. So I thought, what's wrong with me? Is it that am I getting old, or there's some problem with me? I went and did health checkups and all those things. So I kind of started after a while making this thing in my mind that I can only productively work for X number of hours. Beyond that, I feel tired. So that's a belief that kind of gradually crept in. And I was also reading and studying a lot about happiness and stuff like that. And so So somehow my belief subconsciously became like I can only work for X number of hours a day before, and after that I'm going to get tired. And then after a while, I remembered that in past I had been doing something like this. I saw one of my friends who is of similar age to mine, who is working 14 hours a day or 12 hours a day, and he wasn't getting tired, and was absolutely having a lot of energy during parties at night. So then one day I kind of had this thought that, you know what, I'm probably making this thing up in my head. So I came up with this new belief that energy is in my mind and I can control this. Now look at this. Many of you might have this belief that we can only work productively for X number of hours. Now this belief is what we call non-empowering belief. So any belief which does not directly help you is a non-empowering belief. And then there can be an empowering belief for the same thing. Like I can work for X number of hours before I get tired, and after that I'll get tired, whatever it is. Or energy is in my mind and I can control it. I can create energy whenever I want. And I have figured out my ways of getting back energy, and you will also have your own ways. So I remember there's a guy who was a grandmaster and a world champion in chess. So during playing chess, if he got very tired, he would just go for a run and come back during the chess. So that was his way of, again, getting back the energy. So whatever be your way, you can always get back the energy. So that's an empowering belief. So I'll give you another non-empowering beliefs example, which is somebody makes you stressed. And this is very common, right? We always have somebody in our life who makes us stressed. It could be somebody in your team, your boss, your spouse, kids, whoever it is. We think that somebody makes us stressed. Now look at this. This is a non-empowering belief because you have absolutely no control on that person. You might be wanting to have control. You may try, but actually you don't have control. So that really does not empower you, right? So he or she makes me stressed is a non-empowering belief. And you can convert that into an empowering belief. How? Which is stress or happiness is independent of others. It does not matter what others say, do. My stress or my happiness is independent of that, and I can have control over it. So that's a more empowering belief. So understanding your belief system is basically something like understanding your operating system. If you want to do reverse engineering, if you want to do exploitation, you have to understand things from the basic fundamental perspective. You have to understand protocols, you have to understand operating system, else you can't do that, right? So to reverse engineer your mind, you have to understand your beliefs. And these beliefs sometimes are so invisible to us that we don't even notice it. It is something like fishes noticing water. I mean, I'm not a fish, so I have no clue, but it's widely believed that fishes don't probably realize the presence of water, or we ourselves don't too many times realize the existence of air around us. It's only when the air is not there we feel its existence, right? So a lot of these beliefs are very, very deep, hidden. We may not be able to understand it well. So one thing which I have done is I made a list of all my empowering and non-empowering beliefs, and I maintained this list for now several years. Any point in time I discover a belief which I have which is non-empowering, I would write it down, and then I will see, can I convert that into an empowering belief. So belief system and understanding that is very, very important in order to do things better, in order to manage your stress, in order to be happy. The next part is power of language, and this is something very, very interesting. Like I don't know if any of your aunts or any of your parents ever told you just before the exam, don't worry about your exam tomorrow. So you know exactly what happened after that. You started worrying, right? So the quality of language and what we are talking, either talking to ourselves or talking with others, that's going to determine the quality of your life. So quality of language has got direct relationship with the quality of your life. So what kind of language or what kind of topics you speak or you discuss with others, that is a reflection of your mental model. That's a reflection of your belief system. So here is this interesting thing. Your mental model influences your speech, and at the same time, your speech influences your mental model. Now, here's an interesting hack that if you want to change your mental model, you can actually change your speech, and eventually your mental model will also get changed. Now, this is a very, very interesting hack, which many of us would probably not use it in a very conscious way. Like, for example, when we feel hurt, we think like we are hurt, or when we feel anger, we feel we are angry. But if you look a little bit deeper, when you are hurt, it might be that your expectation is not met. It very, very scientifically without getting emotional, then heart is equal to expectation not met. So instead of saying like I'm hurt or I'm deeply hurt because of your behavior or two things will be different. Thinking about rejection, or you can add the word bit. So instead of saying I'm angry, I mean, one way to tone it down is you can say I'm bit angry. And another way to make it better is like you violated one of the principles, which is something which I expected you to do. So this language is very, very important. And then one level deeper, once you kind of analyze anger, you may notice that anger is nothing but fear. So deep inside, you are afraid of something which causes anger. And I noticed the same thing about myself once I tried to understand my emotions. So the language which you use and being conscious of that is going to be a very, very interesting tool, both from the perspective of strategy as well as tactic, to influence the quality of your life. So remember, the quality of language will determine the quality of your life. The next thing, this is another very, very kind of deep understanding, which is very helpful, and I had absolutely no clue of this, and many of the things which I'm talking about, these are kind of directly stolen from lots of people, and the good thing is I at least tried to apply those in my life. Some of those I tried, failed, some of those worked, and most of it would be stolen from various places. So one of the things is emotion means what? Emotion means call to action. So you may think like, okay, I'm super stressed and I'm feeling this pain or this anger or this sorrow, whatever it is. But if you look at the meaning of each of these emotions has a meaning, and there is an evolutionary reason for these emotions. Like, for example, pain. We obviously don't like pain, but it is super important to understand how critical role, or what kind of critical role pain played in the evolution of our of the humankind. So there are some diseases where people don't feel pain. I think leprosy is one of those. So when people don't feel pain, I mean, it may apparently sound interesting, but then what happens to them is, like, for one of the patients, rats came at night and kind of bit off a good part of the toe without this person realizing it. Sometimes people don't realize that something very heavy fell on their feet and damaged their leg or whatever. So pain is very, very important. Pain means that you need to take some action. So every emotion is basically a call to action. So instead of thinking I'm stressed, what it actually means, what does the emotion tell to you? The emotion is telling that you need to plan, or you need to delegate, or you need to reduce the number of things in your plate. Whatever it is, stress means something. So every emotion is basically a call to action. So instead of thinking about emotion, if you think, what action do I need to take, or what action does it ask me to take, The moment you think about it in this way, one is you will take the right kind of measures and your mind will be a lot more, you'll have a lot more fulfilling life. Mind will be a lot more at peace if you can understand what each of these emotion means in terms of call to action. Pain is another. So I went through this experience of, I tried to design my own apartment. I I actually did my bachelor's in computer science, but I also did a parallel bachelor's, a minor bachelor's in architecture. So when I got this new home, I thought of designing it by myself, and I got these contractors to work on that. I created a very complex design with transformability, where walls can move and beds can hide and stuff like that. And then I got this contractor, and this guy completely messed it up. We basically, because of the way things happened, we were homeless for a certain period of time. So this caused extreme pain, and I was obviously very in a very bad mental state. But after a while, I tried to understand, what does this mean? What does this pain mean? So it means opportunity to learn. So I actually once then sat down and wrote down all the things, like, okay, these are the key learning from this. Put it in my checklist. And and any pain that you look at, if you see, like, it will always be the case that there will be something to learn. So if you look at pain as an opportunity to learn and avoid that in future, then all of a sudden the intensity of that gets decreased. So considering every emotion as a call to action, understanding that and taking the right action is another element. The next part which I wanted to talk about is the power of anchors. And anchors are something which completely kind of defines our life without even we realizing it. So these are all very hidden things. I'll give you some examples. Like, I don't know if any of you have friends. The moment you look at the suppose you meet the guy, the moment you look at the person, what you think of is beer or going to the bar. So what has happened is that through your various life experiences, each of these individuals have got anchored to certain kind of thoughts, emotions. So look at somebody and think of going and having a beer. You look at somebody and you think, I must run away, and this guy is going to talk something really negative or something like that. Or you go to a temple and you feel at peace, or you go to a forest and you feel at peace. You listen to your music and you feel great. You have a coffee, you feel great. I have certain anchors related to books, smell of books from my childhood, etc. So all these anchors changes our mood. Sometimes somebody's voice could be an anchor. The moment you hear that voice, either that makes you feel tensed or makes you feel happy. So all of us have all these anchors, which are kind of built into our mind. Is very subconscious. We're not always aware of it. So one thing that you could do is create a list of all these anchors. What are these positive anchors? What are the negative anchors? And I have, when I made those lists, I found out something very interesting, that these positive anchors are all very simple things, like which could be going for a swim, or going for a walk in the forest, being in the nature, listening to some nice music, reading some books, spending some time with certain people, etc., etc. So uh, most of these positive anchors, if you look at today, you might see that most of it is actually possible to do despite the lockdown, despite whatever coronavirus situation is there today. So if you make a list of all these anchors and see how many of those you can actually make it or design it as a part of your life. So once you have a list of your positive anchors and negative anchors, you can actually design your life to a certain degree. 100% is not in our control, but you can then pick up those things. Another very interesting thing is, which I haven't put it up on this presentation, is contemplating death. Now, this apparently sounds pretty negative, and especially in today's context. But I once read about contemplating death in one of the books, which was a very interesting eye-opener. So imagine this scenario that you had only 5 days in life. in that case, what would you do? What are the things which are most important to you? In that case, and it has been seen, like in many cases, people who had that short span of life, when they got the time out of hospital, they went and enjoyed the rain, they looked at the trees, they listened to the birds, they went and spoke to some people whom they like, they went and said sorry to some people whom they made unhappy, etc., and things like that. So the moment you put a constraint like that in your life, what happens is you come out and understand what are the things which are most meaningful for you in your life. So contemplating death can help you to find out what are the most meaningful things in your life. So is it that going to Facebook and looking at all those news, is that the most meaningful thing, or looking at the WhatsApp very often, or reading news? The moment you create a kind of simulated time-bound um, uh, uh, constraint, what happens is you realize what are the things which are most important for you. So you can do that as a simulation experiment and figure out what's most important for you. You can find out your positive anchors and then design your life around that. You can do more of those things, and that will make your life a lot more meaningful. So I have another talk which I did at RSA USA on habits and in the context of cybersecurity. I will not talk about it today, but if you get a chance, please do have a look at it. It talks about how habits are formed, how anchors are formed automatically, subconsciously, and how you can understand those, how you can change a habit, how you can utilize a habit. So the anchors are very, very powerful. You can design your life around these anchors and what are these most important things in your life. So power of minimalism. So I started getting interested in minimalism. Generally, when I get interested in something, I read a lot of books on that. So this had been one of those things where I actually did not read that much, but I started practicing it. And minimalism sometimes looks a little bit negative. I mean, everybody wants to live life big, and we have all these ads from alcohol companies, etc., on living big life, and all media and everything promoting that. So there's somebody who, instead of using the word minimalism, came up with this term essentialism. So you can also think about minimalism as essentialism, things what's most essential for you in your life. And in a way, I mean, I never realized that what's the word essential really means until the lockdown happened. So now we all know what essential services means. So what's really essential for you in your life? So there are a few things which I started doing. Some very, very tactical things. Like I noticed, went to the wardrobe and noticed that I had some 300 shorts, these, that, and all these things, which was crazy. I mean, we generally complain, women, etc., that they have more clothes, and I think even men, if they look into their cupboards, might notice that they have no less. So I was one of them, had so many clothes. So I put all of those into a big box, decided to give them away, and kept only 1 week's clothes, just like 5 to 7 sets of each of the things. Then we went for a 45-day trip. This was after my previous company got acquired and we had some time. So we went for a 45 days trip, and we just had a small backpack, which is like the school bags, or the office bags. Just one small bag like that, not the backpacks which you see people traveling with, especially the foreigners on international travel. Not those kind of backpacks, very small office bag kind of thing, which had got only 5 or 6 sets of clothes. And we traveled to 7 or 8 countries in 45 days, a lot of interesting places. And that was really such a great learning. All we had was that and nothing else. And that was so relieving when you don't have these things. So having less number of belonging all of a sudden will declutter your mind. And that means also assets. I mean, do we need to have all these physical things which we have? Do we need to have all the books, all this stuff which we have in our house? That also means the same with the goals. Whatever goals you have, whatever projects are you working on, should you really work on all those projects, or should you focus on a few that really matters? I stopped watching television and stopped reading newspaper, and all came out of all the social media around, I think, almost social media around 3 years back. But newspaper and television almost 10 years. And life became much better with that. I might now get back to social media a little bit, and there is a reason behind that. I'll explain that later. That's also a one way for me to test another thing which I learned, which I'll come a little bit later. So also the people you meet. Do I need to meet all the people? So who are the people who matters the most to you? Who are the people whom you love to meet? Who are the people who makes your life better? So minimalism means knowing what's most important for you. And minimalism is a way of life. When you become minimal, you look at your life and your way of living, and you do everything aligned with that philosophy. So the other thing is the power of gratitude. Now, this is something which I first read in a few books, read and heard in a few of the TED Talks, etc. And I considered the importance of this in a slightly different language of my own. I did some research on spam filters long time back during my IIT days. So what you do is, when you write a spam filter or a statistical filter, what you do is you train the algorithm or train the program with two data set. One known set of good data set and a known set of bad data set or bad emails. And then this filter, spam filter, becomes very good in finding spams. So if you look at our mind is very much like that spam filter. We need to train our mind to find out things which are empowering for us. Now, some of our minds are very good in finding certain things. And as security professionals, audit professionals, sometimes we need to do things like that. I mean, we become very good in finding flaws. And there's an interesting story of a guy from Big Four, not in India, in US. He was an auditor, so he was very good in finding flaws and gaps. So once he created a list of 10 audit findings for his wife in terms of what gaps she had. And you know what happened next. So when we do certain things at office, the same thing we also go back and do at home. So what do? We need to train our mind to find, say, the positive things, because that's going to help us. So one way of training the mind to see positive things is to have the feeling of gratitude. So what you can do is daily, you can think in the morning, what are the 3 good or 5 good things that happened the previous day? And some of you might be very good at it because you are always looking at positive things. Even in that case, you may continue doing this as an exercise, but some of you may be average or may not be that great. I remember to one of my uncles, I told this, and I asked him, like, you make a list of 5 good things that had happened the previous day. He called me next day and said, you know what, I could not find a single one. So training your mind with the power of gratitude is very, very helpful to have a positive outlook in life. Power of giving. So this is another very interesting thing, and it had been now scientifically studied that when you do something good for others, it actually releases endorphin, and it's called helper's high, and you basically get high without drinking or whatever. So giving makes you happier. So if you are a selfless person, give. It's helpful. If you are selfish, I would also suggest you to consider giving, because that's going to help you. So people who are givers are a lot happier in their life. So this is one part. This had been some of the strategies and tactics. The next part is going to be slightly deeper into the mind. It had been more of my recent understanding or recent studies which I have been making. And so one very interesting thing is, I was talking about the power of language, right? And if you think, like, who is the person with whom you speak the most? And I had asked this question to many, and they said, like, this person or that person, this friend, my wife, whatever. So the interesting thing is that you speak the most with yourself. Is the voice in your head which is continuously speaking to you. And this is the interesting thing, that this voice in the head is very boring. this voice tells the same thing again and again, plays the same video to you again and again. You don't watch that bad movie 10 times, right? The one which you hated. But this voice, and it's not just a voice, it's also a video, a 4D, 5D, whatever it is, maximal dimensional video. And this plays that same thing again and again, that same thing that you dislike, the same thing that is boring, and you're going to still get immersed into that. So knowing your inner roommate is very, very important part of moving to the next part, and I'll gradually get into the next phase. So one day what you can do is just be aware of what is your inner roommate telling you. When you go out for a walk and you go for the shoes, what does it say? It might say that I need to buy a new pair of shoes. Or you go for a dinner and you're having the dinner, and it, while you are enjoying the food, it tells you, I had a pathetic dinner yesterday and this guy or this restaurant is really bad. I mean, when you're having a great food, your roommate, inner roommate, reminds you of all the bad experiences you had. And things like that. So one day just spending, you can't probably do it the whole day, but just trying or making an attempt to watch what your mind does. What does it speak in your head? What's the voice in your head doing? This is something very powerful, especially for moving to the next phase, and I'll gradually go to that. So this is one of the very interesting exercise. So once you observe your inner roommate and understand your voice in the head, this is an interesting realization, which is that you are not your thoughts. We say that I am stressed, but am I stressed? Who am I? I mean, that's a very deep question, who am I? But definitely I am not stressed, but I'm experiencing stress. And realizing that the experiences that you have, or the thoughts that you have, and you are two different things. You are the thinker of the thoughts. The thoughts are different, you are different. Once you are able to establish that subject-object relationship, that is super, super powerful. Now, it's probably much easier to say, but it is very, very hard to do, because you know some of those great movies, right? And by some great directors, when you watch that movie, you are fully into the movie. You experience that movie as if you were the hero of this movie. You are experiencing that and completely get lost. And all of a sudden you realize, that's a movie. You come back to reality, right? Or you were in a dream and you think that the dream is the reality. So in our life, when some of these difficult moments or even normal moments, all these experiences that we are having is a much more powerful, multidimensional experience, much better director than any of the movie directors we have ever seen. But what happens is, in a movie, you know that it's a movie going on, but in life, we really don't realize that these experiences which are going on or which I am experiencing is not what I am. I'm the thinker of the thoughts. So having that realization that this is an object and I'm the subject, or these are the thoughts and I'm the thinker of the thoughts, this detachment, this ability to come out of it will give you tremendous freedom. And the moment you do that, then those things which makes you stressed, those things which creates a lot of anguish, a lot of anger, now will get dissolved in a lot more ease. I mean, it's not going to happen in a day, but it is a very, very powerful thought to just realize. So for me, this had been slightly about going deeper and understanding things. And I just got curious, and looking at it from an engineering perspective, it makes absolute sense, right? That these thoughts are not me. I mean, if you think that all the SIEM logs and all the alerts that you are getting is yourself. I mean, some of you might think in that way. The moment you get those alerts, etc., you may get very associated with it. But then the SIEM alerts or the logs which you get, those are logs. You don't get emotionally attached to that. But when it comes to these thoughts and our emotions, we get. So you need to look at these thoughts as the log collectors, and incidents which are happening, and you are the person who is experiencing this. So the question is, how do I then get, or how do we get free from this? We are tangled in these emotions. How do we get free from this? So here is this interesting thing. You can get free from it in many different ways. So if you want to get free from stress, one way is that first slide which I had, which is having all those tools and techniques and delegation, better focus, better management, and all these things that will reduce your stress. That's one approach. But imagine a scenario like that, like this, that suppose there is a thorn in your body, and this thorn touches some nerves, and you feel extreme pain, and then every time there is a touch, you feel that pain. So what you do is you build a protective layer on top of it, and make sure that the thorn doesn't get touched. But then maybe suppose you fall in love, then you realize you can't hug anybody. Then you do something else. You create some more apparatus and build some really interesting technology, and the thorn is there, and you're still able to do everything that you want in your life. Now the interesting thing is, you may think, okay, I got the freedom from the thorn, but if you look deeper, it's the thorn which is completely designing your life. It has completely changed the way you do things. So there are these fears in our mind. There are these emotions, deep beliefs in our mind, which are actually driving our life completely, and we don't realize it. So if you look at the world from the perspective of fear, insecurity, then the way you will design life will be very different. So the question is, how do you then come out of this fear? How do you remove that thorn? So the way to do that is something. I'll kind of steal a story from Buddha. I don't know if I would tell you this story perfectly or not, but I'll make an attempt. So Buddha, before getting enlightened, there is this story that the demon called Mara came and tried to get Buddha defocused with all these different kinds of emotions. So Buddha had to defeat that, and then he eventually obviously got enlightened. And then interestingly, Mara used to come back time and again, trying to again attack him. So Buddha's friend Ananda, he used to time warn Buddha that, see, Mara is coming to attack you. So Buddha did something interesting. Buddha, whenever he saw Mara, he said, yeah, Mara, I can see you. And then he invited Mara to have a tea with him. So this story has the meaning that when you have these negative emotions, etc., one is you can fight, but the other is you can also be at peace, and you can invite your negative emotions to have a tea with you. That's the story of inviting Mara to tea. So whatever is the emotion, one option is you try to stop that emotion. Now, if you try to stop that, that's going to control your life. The other is trying to understand that emotion and be at peace with the emotion. You invite those emotions and you observe it. So here is this thing which Vipassana also talks about, or probably Vipassana first talked about, is about observation of yourself. So whenever you are having these emotions, observing what happens to you, what happens to your ears, what happens to your body, what's the temperature like, what's your mind thinking. So just observing that emotion and not trying to stop it. Because here's this thing, the moment you try to stop it, you give a lot of power to that. So if I ask you, stop thinking of a pink elephant, then probably you might have thought of a pink elephant, right? So being at peace with that emotion, understanding that, deconstructing that, you all, those who are cybersecurity professionals, I mean, um, in order to find out a vulnerability, you do fuzzing, reversing, right? So do that fuzzing and reversing and understand that emotion and be at peace with it. And one interesting thing is, a lot of you know that Buddhism talks about suffering, right? Now, here is this interesting thing that actually Buddha never spoke about suffering. And I have a definite proof of that. And that is, he did not know English, so he can't say suffering for sure. So what Buddha spoke about was dukkha instead of suffering. And what does dukkha mean? So dukkha means that in the Aryan language, when you have these bullock carts or carts, you have a wheel, and then there is a hole in the wheel, and you have to align the axle properly. And if the hole is not right in the center, then you have a bumpy ride. So dukkha means not centered. So what Buddha said is that if you are not centered, or when life is not centered, you have a bumpy ride. So what is then being centered? So being centered is having this ability to dissociate yourself from your emotions and see that those emotions are not yourself, having the ability to observe it from this center of consciousness or whatever you call. Now, I'm not a big fan of religion, but if you look at this philosophy is very powerful. Having this ability to deconstruct, reverse engineer your emotions and understanding that your emotions is not you is a kind of freedom from your thorn. So it's not really about if you have a SQL injection, you can have a WAF, but is that the best thing? I mean, if you can't go and fix the code, yes, that's probably the best alternative. But the best thing is to go and fix the code, right? So how do you fix the code here? The way to fix the code is understanding this, having this ability to observe your emotion and understanding that your emotions are not yourself. And here's this thing, understanding how will you be able to kind of be detached and be at peace with this negative emotions? The way is to understand that everything is transient. If you think of all those bad times, all those bad moments at night when you could not sleep because somebody told you something or because something bad happened, if you think back, everything got changed, right? So bad things came, bad things went. Good things came, good things went. So everything is transient. So understanding this and reminding yourself every moment, may not be every moment, but every day, whenever you can, that things are transient. That will give you tremendous power to be at peace with these emotions. So I remember there had always been this case. I love traveling a lot, and then whenever we go to these resorts in these beautiful places, I love nature, so we go to all these great natural places. So just the day when we have to check out in the morning, I feel very restless because in the noon I have to leave this place and try to extend that checkout time by an hour, and because I want to cling to it, I don't want to let go this beautiful place because I love it so much, right? And that, what it does is reduces my joy for that entire morning. But once I realized that it's transient, now it's not that I can do it very well, but I at least try to tell my mind, you know what, it's going to be transient, so be at peace with it and just enjoy this. So what is mindfulness? I know a lot of people talk about mindfulness today. All of a sudden, meditation and everything became a very hot topic. So meditation was probably never so popular. If you don't know, some of these meditation apps has become today billion-dollar companies. So what is mindfulness? So mindfulness is nothing but being aware of yourself, being aware of your mind. That's basically what mindfulness is. So, and I spoke about all these things and came to mindfulness so that you understand that aspect. So I'll not spend too much of time here explaining mindfulness, but here is one thing which I want to talk about, that what is not mindfulness. A lot of people have frequently say that mindfulness is being in present. No, mindfulness is not being in present. A kid is always in the present. You give a toy to the kid is very happy. You snatch away the toy from the kid is very sad. The kid is absolutely in the present. The kid is not thinking about, will I get a toy tomorrow? Will I get the chocolate 3 weeks down the line? No. So being in the present is something else. So the kid is absolutely in the present, but not mindful at all. So just being in the present is not equal to being mindful. Being mindful is about being aware of your mind, body, reality. It's like reverse engineering and finding out a vulnerability. Those who have done reverse engineering, you know how it works, right? It's about going deep, understanding, being aware of things. It is more like building a SOC, building a security operations center. You know what a SOC does, right? I mean, you collect all these logs, you correlate, you make inferences. Now, if you don't have these logs, will you be able to predict things? Will you be able to detect things? Absolutely not. So look at mindfulness as your SOC for the mind. First is having this ability to detect these logs. Second is ability to go deep and analyze and do this root cause analysis. So when you think of mindfulness, think of building a SOC, but for your mind. So summing it up, this had been, I love frameworks, NIST cybersecurity framework and CMM level 1, level 2, level 3, etc. So I kind of built a few levels based on like what I had been going through in my life. And the level 1 is what I would call is chaotic, ad hoc, go with the flow, where life determines situation and people determines your state of mind. So whatever happens externally is going to determine your quality of life and quality of mind. Level 2 is where you can protect yourself from stress. You have better management of life and work, but you still try to defend from stress. Now, this defense from stress is very much like that attempt which we made even in cybersecurity, defense in depth, right? We had been trying to defend from hackers for a very long time until maybe 4 or 5 years back, where we started talking more about detect, respond, recover. Earlier, it was more about defending and protecting. And then we realized, you know what, we just can't do that. You need to have detect, respond, and recover. So level 3 is where you are able to detect, respond, and recover from your emotions. It's about having that conscious awareness, understanding the mind, understanding the reality. And that reality which we make up in our mind is not the reality. The reality is something else. So the mind looks at things and creates a reality for you. But the actual reality might be something else. For the humankind to discover that reality might be impossible. But whatever it is, in level 3, it's that ability to detect, respond, and recover from emotions. And the final level 4 is where you are able to do this in an unconscious manner. So level 3 is where you are able to do consciously. Level 4, you do it unconsciously. So that's what probably enlightened is. I don't know what level 4 is actually, but I just kept a level which is unattainable. You always keep a level which is unattainable. So these are the kind of 4 levels, and I have a few more things, which is some of these books. Yeah, like I would recommend this book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello, Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Now these 2 books has got a little bit of religious angle to it. I'm not much into religion, so I kind of abstracted the religion out of it and just looked at it from purely a kind of engineering perspective of engineering of the mind. There's another book called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Anker. It's a very practical book which you can go and implement things at your office. Art of Happiness by Dalai Lama. It is kind of in between these 2. These are 4 books. I read a lot more books, but I thought let me suggest 3 or 4, and these are the 4 which came to my mind. Apps. I don't use any of these meditation apps. I think there are some very interesting videos which are available for free in YouTube. I use those, but I want to try some of these apps because I really don't know what I'm missing. So I would probably go and check some of those. And these are 3 apps which are interesting. Waking Up and Calm. These 2 apps are much more widely recommended than Headspace, even though Headspace is there for a long time. Some of these podcasts, like Making Sense by Sam Harris, Tim Ferriss Show, and Peter Attia Drive. So in these, not all these podcasts are related to stress management and happiness and things like that. Many are generic, some are related to health. In Peter Attia, in Tim Ferriss, some could be related to management. But these are 3 which I'm kind of listening right now. And there are many more which I listen to, but in my pursuit towards minimalism, I did not want to suggest too many. Some of these resources, these are 4 videos which I would suggest. First is by Joseph Goldstein on mindfulness and what it is not. Now, I haven't gone through this entire video, but this guy is very well known in US, and I listened to some of his podcasts, so I believe this is going to be a good one. Waking Up with Sam Harris is a mindfulness meditation. I tried this myself, 20-minute guided mindfulness exercise, another which I tried. And the last one is walking meditation. So I was looking for some walking meditation because in the morning I can go out for a walk and meditate. So this is the best one which I could discover. If any of you find something better, please let me know. So to conclude, we discussed about all these various levels, starting from very practical, action-oriented things to slightly philosophical and maybe even spiritual things. So here is this thing. I mean, today we may get hit by these emotions. Like all of a sudden we feel this anger or this joy or this absolute sense of despair, hopelessness. And when this happens, it's like you get hit by a train, right? And you suddenly get these emotions. And you may not see that the train is coming and hitting you. You just get hit. So most of us, including me, we are in that stage. We just get hit by the train and realize, oh, I got hit by the train. So someday with all these practices, you'll see that the train is coming. But then sometimes I can see the train coming. I think that's a little bit of progress for me, but I still get hit. So I see the train coming and I get hit. And someday will be a day when you just get off the track. But the key thing is about seeing the train coming. And I hope with these practices, you'll be able to see the train and someday get off the track. And maybe some of you are already quite good at getting off the track. So before we close, I think we have almost taken the entire time. So any of you, if you have any questions, I would probably try to answer. I can see some of the questions. So one question is, do we get access to the recorded series? Yes, I hope so. Another question is on, we'll complete on time, so I'll probably not be able to take all the questions. What are your thoughts on yoga, not physical, but complete yoga as a way to reduce stress and improve awareness in life? It's a great question. My answer is I don't know yoga well. I do yoga every morning though. Every morning I do Surya Namaskar. I do some of the yoga which I consider as great stretching exercise. But yoga is not just exercise, right? It has a lot more. So the thing is, if you look at these various philosophies, whether yoga, meditation, vipassana, etc., there's a root which is there in Asia. The roots are in Asia. And yoga also has that root in terms of understanding yourself. Yoga is probably a lot more broader. So one thing that happened was that Buddha took a lot of those principles and then modified those and came up with his version of life. So I kind of got more interested in that approach of more of understanding yourself. So I did not try to study all the other aspects of yoga. But my guess is, yes, yoga can also help you to reduce stress. If you look at the not just yoga from the perspective of exercise, but also from the perspective of the philosophy. And many of these will might be very similar. The last question, how to let go in this crisis? Wow, that's a great question. How to let go? So letting go is a very, very hard thing, right? So let's look at the stress. So I'll tell you about what I did about this stress. So I typically stay completely away from news, but when this coronavirus situation came up, I started getting into this mode of looking into the numbers and the statistics and the news. I kind of had this feeling from a holistic perspective is super strategic, and it needed that kind of focus and attention. So when I looked at it, more from the perspective of not really getting anxious, but looking at it that what does it mean? I mean, what kind of action do I need to take? So when I looked at it, these are the kind of things which I thought of, like instead of looking at it as something to get anxious for, I looked at it that this emotion is a call to action. And what kind of call to action? So first is I created an Excel sheet, not Excel, but Google spreadsheet. So I typically write things down, and this is a very, very powerful tool. If you are going through a lot of negative emotions or whatever it is, writing it down is very helpful. So I created a document. And in that document, I created that this coronavirus situation, if it goes bad, what are the kind of impacts that it can create? So level 1, it could be this. Level 2, it could be this. Level 3, it could be this. And if that happens, how does it impact the company and our life? And if that happens, what kind of actions do I take? So I kind of built a playbook for this, where for each of these various stages, I have created this set of actions. And for the company, for example, we started doing this work from home planning way before the lockdown, etc., started coming. In fact, some of the people in our team found me as a little bit paranoid trying to do that. So that's one kind of preparedness. The second thing which I looked at it is also from the perspective of, will it open any opportunity? I mean, obviously, this is really, really bad. I feel absolutely bad in terms of all the hardship, especially, a lot of people. I'm fortunate that I am not going through the kind of hardship which many others are going through. It's very, very unfortunate to them. But then you can also look at it as an opportunity. Like, for example, maybe you wanted to do something good for the society. Maybe here's a chance you can do that. We this year started a few things, like we decided to give 2 additional holidays for people who would go and do something good for the society. These are paid holidays. But outside of these things, there's also an opportunity. Suppose maybe there's a potential opportunity in the market. When the market goes very down, you may find opportunities to invest in stocks. The Indian stock market had been very, very expensive. Now the PE ratio has become slightly more, I think, reasonable, right? So when you look at this crisis, the crisis means 2 things. One is bad things, and the other is good things. For the bad things, you need to take some actions today. For the good things, you need to take some actions today. So the crisis means nothing but certain actions. That's one part. The second thing, which is basically when you go through these emotions, you can also just try to observe, which I was talking about. Like, when I'm going through the emotions, what's happening? Let me understand my emotion. How do I feel about it? Why do I feel in this way? What are my beliefs? So this thing is also an opportunity for you to do penetration testing on your mind. In order to do your attack surface analysis and doing red teaming, etc., you hire people, right? And pay them money. They simulate all the bad things to find out your flaws. Now, here is a crisis scenario. Use this scenario. It's a real one. Use this scenario to understand your mental model. Use this scenario to understand how you feel, how does your mind work, where are the places where you can make yourself stronger. So this pain is an opportunity for you to also learn. So look at this. You need to reframe this entire thing, and instead of looking at it as a negative thing, obviously it can become very negative, but whatever it is, the outcome is not fully under your control. What is under your control is how you perceive it in your mind and what kind of actions do you take. So you have control over only 2 things. How do you react to it mentally, and how do you react to it in terms of your action? So that's broadly how I would kind of propose as an idea to look into this as a crisis. Somebody mentioned Vipassana is good and you should try. I would absolutely agree with you. I mean, whether you have religious inclination or not, observing your mind is very much like understanding your network architecture, understanding your security model, I mean, if you don't know your architecture, you can't build your defense and whatever it is. You can't build that security program. So Vipassana is a great thing for sure. Do you suggest any time of practicing meditation and awareness? Great question. I also thought of this. So here is this thing. A long time back when I started doing some meditation, and I am absolutely self-taught. I have no clue of doing meditation. I'm just trying to steal from others. So when I started doing meditation, if there was these sounds or somebody used to come and shout, all these things used to just make me perturbed. I mean, I'm meditating. How can you come and disturb me? So in that way, if you want no disturbance, doing it early morning, late night, and things like that, that's the thing. But then after a while, I realized, you know what, meditation is my ability to understand how the mind works. It's about, I'm building that skill to understand my mind. I'm building that skill to observe my mind. So when somebody comes and does all these negative things, that's a great opportunity. Now I can observe. The moment somebody shouted, my kid shouted on the other side, what happened? And I noticed a kind of spark in a part of my body which moved from one side to my ears and my head. And I'm serious. So this is something which I experienced the moment it happened. Okay, so when all these disturbances, etc., is there, you can also observe your mind, what happens in your mind, your body. You can observe, okay, the moment it happened, then my mind went to something else and I started thinking about that. So practicing meditation, you can do it anytime. That's the answer. And then there are two types of, or two schools of meditation. And this is one thing maybe I can highlight. One school of meditation is focus oriented, which tells you that here is a candle flame, focus on that. Here is a circle, focus on that. And you try to force your mind to extreme focus and make your mind empty. That's one school of meditation. I don't do that. That has its own advantages. The school which I try is pure observation without trying to change, where you invite Mara for tea, where all these emotions, negative, positive, whatever comes, you open the door and say, come join the party. So negative emotions come, you say, come join the party. Positive, come join the party. So in that school of meditation where you are just observing your mind and body, you don't need any specific time. You don't need closed doors and windows. Whereas for the other one, is very helpful if you practice it in the morning and stuff like that. And a few things which I want to add. Once I started doing meditation, there's a very interesting learning which I had. There are many learning or many observations I had. So this was again just after iViZ got acquired. I started noticing a lot of issues. Like I used to have jaw pain, and I just did not realize why am I getting jaw pain. Did some research, this, that, and all on the internet. And then after a while, I started doing meditation. And once I started practicing a little bit more, I realized that my observation power of myself increased a little bit. So while I was traveling through Bangalore traffic, I realized that I immediately, once I start traveling, I make my jaw very tight. So my jaw is super tight while traveling. I never noticed that throughout my life. After starting this meditation, I realized that. And the moment, not just jaws, even my legs, the fingers in my legs, etc., they're a little bit tight and crumpled, etc. So once you start doing this kind of meditation, you can actually meditate in a way while you are driving. It's not, meditation doesn't mean you get lost in the second school of meditation. In the first school, you get lost. In the second school, you are at a heightened state of awareness. So when you are at a heightened state of awareness, you can obviously also drive. But then if your focus gets too much into your body and not on the road, that could be dangerous. So I would suggest you not to. But long story short, you can do it anytime, in any context, any situation. Great. So I think I overshot the time by a little bit. If some of your questions are not answered, just drop me a note. I'll try my best to answer. And also, I would love to hear from some of you in terms of knowing your experiences, what you tried, what worked for you, what did not. So I want to thank all of you for joining this session, and also wish you all the best during this crisis
Thank you,
scenario. My
Bikash.
best wishes for you as well as all your family, friends, and I hope and wish that we as a country as well as we as a world come out of this crisis soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Bikash. Thank you for this wonderful session. I hope this session was useful for you. I'm glad so many of you stayed back till the end. We will publish this online on CISO Platform and we'll send you the link. If you have any questions or you want to share your knowledge through a webinar, please feel free to write back to us at contact@cisoplatform.com. I have shared the mail in the chat section also. Thank you so much.